All right, I sound really terrible because I lost my voice. I sound just terrible. Thyroid also likes to mess around with my voice, so I lose it very, very quickly. I'm so sorry. I sound terrible. I'm so sorry. But let's get started. We start off with the mistake of the background being too dark, and the reason why the background has to be lighter is because the light environment is one part of like a three-legged table that is your canvas. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm lightening this up because it's a response directly to the lightening of the background. The background has to be much lighter. And the reason why, again, is because you've got your light source, your background, and your object. And there are three legs of a triangular table. And what we have to do is by lightening the background, we're proving that the light source is bright, it's daytime, it's a sharp light source, it's a strong light source, it's not from a lamp nearby at night. It is from a really bright universal light source like the sun, which is the strongest thing that has shined. I don't care if science has managed to make a light source brighter than the sun. I'm sorry, it's not accessible to me to study as a student. Right now, as far as we're concerned, outside of the experiments of science, the sun is the brightest thing that we know that can shine. That is the representative for our little planet and our little solar system. That is our universal environmental light source. That's the one that we reference. Its strength, its shadow behavior, maybe in a universe far, far away, in a landscape that is from cast by a sun that's a little closer to its planet, maybe the cast shadows will always stay sharp because they're from a sun that's really strong that's close to it. But even then, I don't know. As far as we're concerned, this is what this sun does to these shadows in this kind of environment. So if we have a sharp cast shadow, sharp in some degree, even if it's fuzzy down here, we are receiving it from a universal light source. So this background right here, just too dark. Too dark, we have to lighten it back up. Of course not outside of its value, just a little bit. The slider is crazy. We're lightening that up. And then we're going to talk about surface areas and gradients that you guys use on surface areas, which is a big mistake. Gradients on surface areas like these, where is it? Like this gradient here, this is not how you do bounce light. When you have a flat surface, and we're talking about bounce light, that flat surface will be exposed to the bounce light throughout its surface. It isn't just going to have this really, really small area that is bright because, oh, there's nearby surface that's reflecting on it. No. The reason why this doesn't happen like this is because the only way for it to have happened like this, if there was a small little mirror beside and this was somewhat reflective. So that's the only way that we have this kind of minor little gradient reflection if there was a tiny little plane beside it reflecting the light back on. But in the background, that's what's causing the secondary diffuse, right? The background is bright. That means that its reflection is actually much brighter. So it's going to change the entire surface, not just one section of it. So I'm just going to really quickly take care of that. And this object is pretty bright in the bright areas, meaning that this is not the midtone, this is not the local value. And when I say local value, at least when I say local value, I mean the color of the object. Okay. So this is what I mean by bounce light. The bounce light actually does this. Even though it's a dark area, for some reason this whole area has been illuminated. And now we've proven, yes, the background color, the light environment, the other leg of this painting, of this table that has three legs. This whole table is stable. The table is stable. Write that back to me. So it doesn't just reflect in one singular area. And this is extreme bounce light that I just added. So this is extreme bounce light. If the bounce light was so intense that it was countering the terminator completely, and we only have remnants of where it doesn't reach in the small mid-tone areas that are facing away from the primary, but aren't directly exposed to the secondary. So experiment with it like that. The way you drew it was much too dark, and that gradient was confusing things. That's not how you react, or that's not how you make a universal light source cast bounce light. The bounce light is just a general attitude change in all the shadows. They just don't get this dark. These surfaces though, this one, let me use 5. Maybe 5 will do better. This one, Okay, let me try it this way instead. This one would actually be much more susceptible to bounce light because it's exposed to this surface. So this would actually be a little brighter, just like that. And that's because this surface is reflecting back. Remember that light doesn't just sit on a surface once it's received by one, it reflects it back up. Light just keeps moving, keeps bouncing off stuff. Why? I don't know. It's just bouncy. It's made of little nerfs. It's just really, really bouncy. I'm sorry, it reminded me of that Everybody Loves Raymond episode. When Raymond said all the cars should be made of Nerf cars, or whatever he said. So that's where the light bounces and it doesn't stay in one spot. And of course, yes, keeping track of all this, mediating all these rules is really, really time consuming. It is hard on your brain RAM. But it's worth it to start off with the primary. It's worth it to just endure the primary choices, just the initial molar changes of the light source on the object. The way the light source changes the object. Just those initial choices, that's all you have to endure. After that, it's tracking the light ray. So tracking, where did it start? It started at the light source, and where can it bounce? And the way it bounces, the direction it bounces to, is by just tracking the surface. Where is the surface looking at? The light source will bounce towards the surface area's direction. Let me put it in a different way. The light source will bounce towards the direction the surface area is looking at. Write that down. Okay? If you can answer the question, where's the surface area facing, then you can answer the question, where's the light source going to bounce? Everyone thinks that the light source is this secondary light source, is this magical bounce lighty thing that has to be generated by Maya or some other lighting studio or After Effects or something. No, it's a real measurable, really easy to execute little trick. Same here. There's no reason for us to have this gradient. It's either it receives the light or it doesn't. There's no gray area. Blending and blending and blending isn't going to answer your form questions. This area doesn't look directly at the surface, so I'm going to start off by making them the exact same value and take away from the surface, shave off some of that brightness by a degree. So if this is 100% brightness, it's looking at the light source. It's the most exposed surface area. This is by degrees, probably like 30 degrees displaced. So I would make it somewhere there. Somewhere just like that. But your shape here is just a little bit weird. It's the surface of this leg of the L, this like down, like the lower piece of the L, is perfectly aligned with the indent over here. So this corner shouldn't be perfectly aligned with this edge. So what we gotta do is overlap them just a little bit. I don't think I helped, but let's see. Alright, so this, again, another gradient. You really don't need gradients. The gradient will not do anything for you. This overly blended surface area, you just have to put one plane value, one plane degree, one plane representation of its condition as it's exposed to the light source. That's the beauty of a form study. We're trying to simplify. If you try to blend in a form study, you're ruining the geometry. Over here, more gradients, too many gradients. Something like this wider gradient, you can get away with it because it's so wide it's representing the light source and the bounce light from the environment. So you can get away with wider gradients, but smaller ones, not so much, especially if they're not facing the light, the secondary light source. So we'll start off with one basic value, and this should be the exact same value as that. They're both facing the same direction, unless this is slightly displaced. I mean, it looks like it's slightly displaced. I can't tell if it's shaved off at an angle or that's just how it's looking. I can't tell if this is looking in the same direction or this is looking this way and that's looking this way. I guess the simplest solution is the best. No, that's still too light. So what we're doing is giving it this value. And it really feels like these are the same leg, like they're part of the same surface. So I'm just going to make them equally illuminated. And then this surface will cast a shadow on this one. Something that looks a little bit like that. Don't forget to cast shadows. Please try making some mistakes. You need to cast shadows so you can make mistakes. If you're not making the mistakes, then you're not learning. You're going to make that mistake at a later time. If you think just by sitting here and listening to me lecture and not trying form studies, and that's enough, and then you're just going to be able to do what you need to do in the next masterpiece, again, that's not possible. That's not going to work out for you. You got to go in there. You got to get your hands dirty. If you're not getting your hands dirty, then you're not making the mistake. You're not really experiencing it. There's this thing that happens with your brush. Well, as soon as you hold a brush, you're suddenly it's like you forgot all your friggin' knowledge. Everything just goes out the window. You have this performance, the stage fright, whenever you hit a canvas that's empty. And you got to learn how to get over that and make sure that your form studies aren't suffering because of that. Or your paintings aren't suffering from that stage fright. And again, that's what a lab environment does for us. The background is just a little bit too dark, but you kind of get away with it because it's a lighter medium than a darker one. And just out here on the outer piece, as the light does get to access this outer piece, just like that. This whole surface is just a little too dark. It needs to be just a little bit lighter. The shape is actually a lighter value. If it's a white block, it's not going to have black shadows. Write this down. A white block does not have black shadows in midday sun, in midday light environment. Okay? If the brightness is high, then you can believe that all of those shadows will be very, very incapable of dropping so low. I'm going to try to make the background just a little bit lighter so you can see that in action. Wow, you guys came to my rescue. I had so many people messaging me. It's nice knowing that in a crisis I have you guys. Alright, so take a look at what this does to the light environment. So the sharp cast shadow that I included has to have a lighter bright environment. A brighter light environment. It just has to, because again, a cast shadow is a reflection of the nature of the light source nearby. A cast shadow is caused by the nature. It's like a mirror reflection of the light source. It's a twin of the light source. So it needs to have some reinforcement. This, if the background was this dark, then it looks like it's cast by a lamp or some darker light source, but the environment is still dark because the universal light source isn't strong enough to brighten the light environment. Alright, so seeing what the background does to the nature of your light source is really, really good. And again, another mistake, another thing you're going to learn in the lab environment, in that white coat environment of, I don't know if white coat is a derogatory term, of a form study. And if we took out this shadow, or we made it a little bit more fuzzy, so the shadow isn't super sharp. So if I made it a little bit more fuzzy and made it just a little bit more overcast, then suddenly in an overcast environment, the cast shadows are way less sharp. Just like that. They're really, really delicate. So that's, you know, that in a cast shadows in an overcast day, the shadows are really fuzzy edges, nothing too sharp, nothing too extreme. But it's good to experiment a little bit more with your, and my tablet went out. Day of technical difficulties. I hate Syndics! It's caused so much trouble, more trouble than it's worth. Okay. Let me get rid of that cast shadow completely. You see that we lose a lot of form. We lose the z-axis. We kind of lose track of what's in front of what. And it's good for cell shading. Cell shading, we don't really have cast shadows. And this is what you would want to do in cell shading. But it doesn't mean the geometry is gone. When we go to a cartoony version of everything, we just have these two shadows. But it doesn't mean we lose the z-axis or the form. We still have a lot of this silhouette. It's just that we don't have this degree of I guess, we don't ruminate to that level. Or what if something's overcast? What if the sun isn't that bright? That's not stuff really for stylization. It is definitely for realism. Okay. So all of these are separate instances of like preparing you for those micro choices you're going to make in a masterpiece one day. That's why a form study is so pivotal to your study, to your portfolio. Pivotal change in the way you approach values. So right here, this brightness, this cast shadow, really sharp. Instantly, I always go for the background. Always go for the background. See what you can accomplish with the background value. If you neglect the background, if you forget to identify what time of day it is, your painting you'll have instances of overcompensation. You'll find yourself trying to find ways to make sense of the light source by either increasing contrast or doing something. Anything to make it make sense again, making it shinier, changing the nature of the object. The whole time, all you really had to do was this, so it can make just a little bit more sense. This will make sense of, not sure why this is getting light, if the cast shadow is casting this way. I think you have two light sources. You've confused yourself and me a little bit, but trying to track down where this light source is coming from. This surface here, yes, it points up, but it will get darker. So the darkest point of this surface is actually one of the lighter points of this surface. And it's really, really similar to it. So what we have to do is make sure that the lightest value here is one of the darkest values here. One of the darkest values. Not the darkest value, that's too dark for an area pointing up. We generally decrease contrast in this area here. And by decreasing contrast, we smudge edges. Lower contrast means weaker edges. We have nothing there. Less light source means weaker edges. The light source needs to feed the edge. And again, the lightest point here is one of the darkest values here. Just take a look at that. Almost the same value. And that's what we want to do. You want to learn about the local values, the local rules. When you have an object that looks away, you have the z-axis happen. This is the z. And it's starting to look away and the light source is coming down. All of these values are a completely different neighborhood. They don't mix. One of them is I want to use like an instance of that, but I can't without referring to an apartheid or referring to some sort of really controversial topic. Just imagine two neighboring people that just don't talk to each other. Right, what are some famous like fictional cultures that just hate each other? I guess oh man, I can't. It's too controversial. So you've got some cast shadows here. This makes no sense. This means that there was a separate light source nearby causing a little trouble, confusing you. This cast shadow, just like we talked about, cast shadow in an overcast environment, it gets really fuzzy, almost not really there. Right, so we're completely fuzzing that. I'm not going to get rid of it completely because, yeah, it does have a cast shadow in this area. There will be one, but this whole section cannot escape its local value. It just can't. Local value meaning the value at this point that everything is limited to because of this z-axis, this displacement. All right, so I'm taking questions now. Questions regarding light sources can feel very abstract, and I don't blame you if you don't have questions or you don't want to jump into that rabbit hole. But if you do have some questions and you can kind of explain them well, we're in regards to the light sources that we're talking about, you can go ahead and ask them now. This cube will cast a shadow on this cylinder. All right, so it's in the way. We've got taken care of that. This light will travel all the way across radially. This shadow on the lower half will not be as dark as this area because the top, the head, the top of this cube is actually bouncing light all the way back on top of this little syringe. We've got some bounce light from the environment on this. But yes, any questions? Montagues and Capulets. Exact. Thank you. I don't know why I didn't go. I didn't go there. I was fucking talking about the Middle East. Don't want to go there at all. All right. So I'm just looking looking at my navigator, making sure that everything's in place, casting this shadow here. These shadows, though they do, you're allowed to cheat and bring them in just a little bit, and they do sit there in the real world. You gotta make sure none of these values are sharing. This is looking up at the light, this little piece, really exposed to it. Not so exposed though, but just enough that it's looking up. These lower pieces, these lower portions right here, are looking down at one of the surfaces here. So let's talk about this front-facing piece. It's got values in it that are a little too close to the Montague value. Alright, so this Capulet value over here, this is Capulet, this is Montague, it's separated by the z-axis, and this is Romeo and Juliet right here in the middle. Alright, so I'm just trying to, oops, get this selection. To actually be good. Be good! Alright, nearly there. Alright. So this whole selection is way too dark. What we gotta do is lighten that up because it's facing forward. It's facing forward, it's getting more light. The cast shadow belongs to the object receiving the cast shadow. That means that this entire section doesn't get to be this dark, meaning it reflects all the way back up and onto this lower facing portion. Which one is Montague? This is Capulet, right? So this whole area gets light source reflected back on it. The shadow doesn't get to be as dark as this one over here, which gets to be pretty dark. Reaching a pretty dark point. Oops. Over here. Just like that, because it's looking completely away from the light source. There's no secondary light source reflection on it. This whole surface area is still too light. Okay. All right. So what are some other choices we can make? The shadow on top of this surface should act, if it's caused by this little protrusion, whatever it is, should actually be circular. I'll look at the questions in just a second. Don't be frustrated. Don't fret. I will see your question. Please make sure it's relevant to the discussion. If it isn't, I shall not answer. So the surface of this sphere, if we drew the longitude and latitude lines, it would reveal that it's actually a swell. It's an outward swell. So it doesn't have, it should actually be, revealing that. And with it would reveal the reflectivity of the surface nearby. This area is very displaced from the light source compared to this area. So this whole half of the McDonald's logo should be, this whole, I don't know what to call it. This doorway, this U, this upside down U shape should be brighter because it's completely facing forward. It's very, very favored by the light. And here it's like, no, you're my enemy. And here it's just looking at the light. Does anyone get these narratives in their heads when they're painting, or is it just me? Have I gone mad? Alright, so it can be something a little, I'm going to overdo it. I'm going to take it down a notch by zooming out. I always add too much and then zoom out to make sure I like it exactly where it is. It kind of feels like it's perfect right here, and the background could have been just a little bit lighter. And this area here is facing upward at the light environment surrounding it, so it's going to be much brighter. Remember, none of these values can share with these values. They just don't share. It's like black and white. So this whole piece right over here can actually be a lot lighter. In fact, it can be a light value, just like that, depending on how reflective it is. Do you see that? Very, very nice. Whenever I say very nice, I think of Trump now. He completely ruined it. Very nice, man. Very nice. Very nice. Fucking pleb. So, doing that. And then the angle of this cast shadow is just a little bit tricky. It should actually be a little bit straighter. But you are in a perspective, so it's just hard to identify exactly. And then you've got reflective surfaces. So if this is reflective, I'll look at the questions. Just give me a sec. If this is reflective, then you build it up radially. Just like that. This little cylinder, doing this form study means the next time you have to paint a forearm or an arm or a thigh, the next time you have to paint an earring, you'll know exactly what to do. It prepares you for instances where you have these exact signatures happening on a functional thing. And these geometries are a learning tool, they're a memorization tool for us. They help us. Because we are very confused very quickly as creatures, and we need a way to organize all of these fundamentals and these rules, ways to remember. Our brain is too cluttered. It's not linear. It's recursive. If it was linear, I think we'd be a much happier species. We'd be more stupid, I think, less imaginative. What about cracks in the light area? What if there's a big cave on the side facing the light? Should that cavity still be lighter than the non-cavities of the dark side? Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've got these babies right here. So this whole area I had a little bit of trouble with earlier. And that's because this area does not face downward like the rest of its buddy. It actually faces forward by a touch. So its value should be much lighter. Not the same value all around because it's got an angle to its shape, but definitely much lighter than any cave that would ever happen on the dark side. Here, this area is right in between the Montagues and the Capulet. This is Mercutio. Okay, so we've got Mercutio, poor Mercutio. 10. Motherfucking Mercutio. Alright. So this area would actually be the perfect example of a midtone. Its value, so we bring its value from the right side, and its shadow from the left side, and we just lighten the dark and darken the light. It's a perfectly placed in the middle. It's so mathematic. It's so simple. It's so easy to break this down. It's a shame we haven't been doing this more often. This surface is in front of this surface, so this calls for an edge. Not so sharp. Alright, but it's still required. So we need to just identify where this cast shadow started so that we can just cast this edge appropriately. This object is in front of this object, therefore we have edges. Beautiful, beautiful edges. When the creative pressure is gone, all that remains is just the science. The beautiful, genderless, nameless, faceless, beautiful science. Okay? Doesn't have to have an armored clad costume design. Doesn't have to have a hair color. You don't have to choose an eye color. You don't have to choose its nation of origin. You don't have to do any reading. You don't have to do any research. There's nothing required of you. No creative pressure whatsoever. You just gotta sit there and find the sciences. Locate the sciences if you can, and that's the beauty of this. This area faces forward. It faces forward for a time, meaning that its cast shadow has different degrees. So we've got, let me select it. It doesn't have just the same value all around. This is a little trickster. It's very, very similar to what's happening in this shape, we start off light because it's facing forward for a degree, and then we end light, but lighter than the surrounding values. This is still facing forward compared to this, but it's still a shadow compared to this section. And this goes back to being just a little bit brighter and sharing the same value as this surface. They share the surface area. Right, they're both looking up, and if this one was this bright and it's right beside it, then why wouldn't it get the same brightness level? And slowly but surely you start rendering. This is rendering. Slowly but surely everything comes together. Whenever I teach, I remember stupid jokes like the whole Shirley, don't call me Shirley. And I just want to laugh, but I don't want to sound like an idiot. Oh man. Okay, other questions. Does bounce light affect better in reflective materials than in matte materials? Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's a really, really easy answer to a very basic question. Very nicely straightforward question. Yes, it does. Bounce light is more efficient when an object bounces off a mirror. It is reflecting at the fraction that it got shaved off of it when it bounced the second time. When it bounced the first time, is much less. So it's got a lot less shaved off of it. All right. And also, when do I use secondary light sources and when are they a bad idea? Always use secondary light sources whenever you can, and that goes back to the style question. If it's a question of style, you can only use 2 cell shades or something like that, then at that point you're limited. You can't really use you know, all the rules of physics. You can only maintain some geometry and bring in some basic shadows and basic core shadows and basic highlights. You can't really, even the highlights, you just bring in a midtone and a shadow. You can't really bring in all these super rules. But if you're painting realistically, bring it in whenever you can. Bring in the Terminator whenever you can. All of that is necessary. This edge right along here needs to be blurred because it's part of even this edge that I made earlier. All of this needs to be blurred away. The reason why is because it's part of the shadowed area. It doesn't get as much light, revealing its edge the way these objects do. Right, this whole section needs to be the same value. This shadow here, still just a little bit too light for its local value. The shadow down here. And if we do the before and after, we can find lots of value sharing. So value sharing isn't just the edges of the nose, the sides of the nose bridge. All right, value sharing is a disease. It's everywhere in our work. All right, this was value sharing right here. Value sharing can be explained very simply. It be a very, very simple explanation for value sharing, but the instances that it can happen in are so complicated. Like this whole piece, extremely complicated. And it's a situation, it's a value sharing situation. Okay. So this is a gradient that's looking up. So I really do want to get into those the character designs, critiquing those for you guys. Because we can, you know, when we do a form study and then we move into like a more creative illustration, we can see that this is exactly why we could have avoided if we had done a form study kind of deal. And you guys know I love saying I told you so. Oh my God, I sound like a boy. I sound like a boy. Why am I so ticklish today? I don't know. Oh yeah, watch The Office. That's why. I was watching The Office. Explains everything. Alright. Still very, very iffy in some of these areas, but I'm a perfectionist, so I gotta just fight it. Before, after. The values were just a little bit dark. The light source was just a little bit confused. It felt like you were exposing both of these surfaces to the same light source, but this original shape, the original cube, was actually telling us a very different kind of light source. When this cube gets light, let's open up Portrait Studio real quick and point to the cube at the light source where both sides are equal in value or equal in exposure. All right, so where are you, Portrait Studio? Uh-oh, there's an update. All right, what else is there? Any more questions? Istebrak, just a suggestion to help with your voice. A lemon ginger tea will alleviate sore throat, scratchy voice for 30 to 60 minutes, in my experience. It's not so much like a sore throat, although I thank you for the recipe. It's like a little bit more to do with what's, like, I don't know, mechanically. I guess I just used it too much. I just not using it as the thing that fixes it. All right, launch. And then we go into the shapes. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. What program do I use? Photoshop CS5. How do you hide the contour of the selected area? Control H. Okay, so let's get the cube. And let's look at it in the angle where, or let's make it happen, where the light source is actually pointing at two angles equally. Just like this, so we're rotating it. No. Point this way. There we go. So it's pointing at both of them equally. Damn it, I rotated it. Alright, so we've got this surface, which is bright, and you were in the study you were doing, you looked at it like this just a little bit, so it had just a little bit of perspective. Let's kind of zoom in just a little bit more so we have a little bit more perspective. So what you did actually wasn't this, you did this. So this means the light source is pointing like that. Take a look at this pointer. Look at what happens when they both have the same value. It means that the angle is completely different. X and Y difference. Completely new direction. So your cast shadows are pointing as if the light source was like this, but your molar cast shadows, the molar choices of your shadows, the original shape on which all the tiny little pieces are attached, that's the light source you follow. You don't just make up a new light source. So here, all of them are now following the same light source. If you wanted a secondary light source to come in and diffuse, by all means, bring it in. Just make sure that it's treated as a tiny little unit, like that, doing its thing. It would diffuse and mess around and cause trouble, as point lights do. Do you see that? This is what I mean by the bigger gradients. If it was a tiny little one, like that, then this is when it has a tiny little gradient. That's when we have a tiny little mirror. This is just reflecting that object. But all of this, the spread right here, is caused by a new light source. And if it's strong enough to counter the primary, it is now the primary. It is now the captain. It says to the primary, I am the captain now. Yeah, so make sure that these are some things that you can you know, you would never have thought about all of this if you waited for a masterpiece. What brushes do I use? They do all the magic, right? Yeah. I use my brushes, the ones I made, and a soft brush. But I did design my own soft brush because I like a little bigger soft brush, less pen pressure. For this one, a little, not enough contrast. I would go lighter on the background and darker on the values. So let me see if I can do that real quick for you. Lighter on the background, and then select inverse, levels, hide, Control H to hide, darker on the values. And this is not like using no man's land values or using crazy contrast. You just had almost zero contrast. And this is perfect for a foggy day, or overcast, foggy, rainy, and you're looking at stuff and it's in the distance. All of these look like they're 10 miles away from me. And if you wanted one of them to be really, really far away, then go ahead and get the background color and make it lose its saturation once again. Get the background color, get on darken, get on lighten, and use it there. and just make it feel like it's very, very far away. Of course, something doesn't look far away unless it is small as well. So for it to really, really look like it's floating off into the distance, let me just tilt it just a little bit so it looks like it's floating instead of grounded. Normal. Alright, so you needed more contrast for these form studies. And I feel like I should be doing even more of these form study critiques, because some of these rules, I would never be able to teach them to you outside of a form study. Like, I personally wouldn't be able to find an instance to describe these specific situations so specifically as we did with this shape on one of your masterpieces. I'd have to work really hard at it to be able to gain, just keep digging into the form to find an example of all of this. But all of it happens all at the same time in a form study environment. Okay, so flatten. Yes. Some of these areas still need work, but all in all, I hope I got the message across. Any questions? This area here is still too light, still too dark. I have to lighten that completely. Any questions at all? And again, the lower portion of this would be just a bit brighter. It's the shape of the doorway reflecting on it. And then the roof of this area right here, just in the distance, would get a bit of reflection off this. Just a bit. Leading the eye into the, because it seems like it can go left once you get in there. And just like that. This is what like a tunnel would do in the daytime. This is how we would paint a tunnel in the daytime. Alright. If an object is blocking the light source, how does its shape affect its cast shadow on the objects in front of it? How does its shape affect its cast shadow? Is its shape shown on the objects? Yes, a cast shadow casts its shape, and that's it. That's the only thing that belongs to the object casting it. The rest all belongs to the object or the light source. The object receiving the light source, meaning that object would, if it's a ripply surface, the cast shadow will be ripply. If it's bright, the cast shadow will be bright. If it's dark, the cast shadow will be dark. And the light source decides how much light we're seeing in all of this, and if the cast shadow is sharp. Istebrak, how do you do the sharp edges? There's many ways. Sometimes I do I use lasso tool. Sometimes I erase and do a new layer. Sometimes I use a hard edged brush, a blocking brush. It really just depends on how comfortable or how much room I have to correct the edge or apply the edge. Is it beneficial to do a form study on an Asaro head or basic geometry that represents facial features like the nose or ears? Absolutely, it's beneficial. Thank you, Isa. I kind of feel like your questions are staged for the sake of the lesson, but absolutely it is. The form studies that we have here, we have something very similar to let me zoom out. And the reason why we included these is because it's so essential to be able to experiment around the planes of the face. It's different when we think cube and we apply all the rules and all the stuff we need to do to paint a cube and learn everything there is about a cube form study. But when it gets into the human face, that's when it gets a little bit tricky. And casting shadows can be very, very difficult. The bright side is that the face is the same no matter where you go. A human face is a human face. And there's a lot that you can do with it. But there is, and there are many instances of making it unique, but there is a fixed anatomy that will never change. So in learning its geometric anatomy, another term that I use, it will benefit you no matter what you're painting, male, female, old, young. The face is the same, the skeleton is the same. The measurements are the only thing that change. All right? So for those who ask, there's always questions on YouTube about what this studio is, what this program is. It's called Portrait Studio. My team and I developed it for instructional and educational purposes. You can find it on the Istebrak store. All right, so let's shut this down and go into some more creative applications of form. So we might talk a little bit about everything though. I'm going to try to leave this one at the end because this is more like gender issues. But we're almost always talking about the background, and the first thing I always go to is the background. I always go to the background first. If I'm having issues figuring out where all these values belong, the background is almost always the culprit. Because there's something's happening that is not reinforcing an accurate light source. So I'm going to just try to get this lasso to read a little bit better. I love the costume design. I love the costume. Very, very beautiful. But if I was a photographer, I wouldn't turn off the lights like you have. Turn the lights on to show off a character design. We also don't have an environment. We keep the environment out of it. So if the room is dark and there's like this backsplash that's a little bit too dark, we don't do that. We don't use the dark backsplash. If this is to be sold on Amazon and I'm trying to sell this object, I surely would allow it to be visible. If this is supposed to go to a 3D modeler and they're supposed to map out some basic blueprints for this character in this game, then again, I wouldn't darken them. I would leave the light environment very, very bright. Not white bright, of course, but we need to brighten this environment. Another reason why it has to be bright is because the choices you made. The cast shadows off the headdress on the face. This is like a daylight. This right here is daylight. And this right here is nighttime. Or just after dusk. The sun is definitely below the horizon. And this is just somewhere in the middle, an indoor room or an outdoor, midday kind of, lower than midday brightness. And in a character design environment, you're just not supposed to be worried about the background. You can make it this value for all you care, for all we care. For all you care, making all kinds of mistakes. But yeah, for all we care, the background could be hot pink. We just don't make it hot pink because we're trying to make the object visible, not the background. So if you're doing a character design and it's not an illustration, this is just for the sake of the design, portfolio, pre-production stuff, we just leave the background alone. Don't put cast shadows or gradients or cool little shadows or weird little double shadows. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone and make it nice and bright enough for your values to shine. Alright, so this is where it was before. In an environment. You've painted her in a studio. It looks like she's being shot in a studio. However, if you want just a little bit of both, I would keep it at this value. It seems like she has those no edge backdrops. Just a little bit brighter. And the reason why I brightened it, for all those reasons, presentation reasons, and for the sake of this brightness that you had here, telling us that the light was actually really, really strong. This, all of this is telling us the brightness of the light source is much, much stronger than you've indicated. And then we have to make it consistent all around. Getting like a basic color dodge, I would do that. And then just introducing that brightness everywhere else. Not in the same degree all the way down. It gets darker the lower we go, but okay. The face should definitely have more contrast. The face is the focal point in this case. Not fully focal, it's not a portrait, but the shine of these chains should be just a little bit more strong. It is a reflective material, so it'll reflect the nature of the light source like a mirror. This surface here is probably some kind of glass or gem, so it'll be a little bit more reflective that way. Just trying to work around this weird lasso that I did. And then we've got these dark pockets. The dark bits here, up here, they're just a little bit too dark. These you can get away with because it's an actual cave. But up here, this entire region is exposed to the light. It's not a real dark pocket. Especially because it's fur, and fur can be a little bit translucent. This whole area should be just a little bit brighter. But character design wise, I wouldn't put the backdrop you put. I would make it very, very bright. Before, just a little too dark, and after. Oops. Before, drowned in light and random bright hot spots, and then damn it, Istebrak. I'm all over the place today. But in a character design, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is just to make that background super light. Super brighten it. Not white, of course. Flatten. So that was the problem. Way muddy colors. If you ever tried to transfer this into color, you'd have a lot of trouble. And here's another instance of you know, bringing an environment in a character design. This doesn't look like an illustration. It looks like a character design setup. If it was an illustration and it was an environment, where's the horizon line? You can't have an environment without a horizon line. It just looks really odd. It looks like you're always drawing characters that are floating in space, and you have the style excuse to get you out of any questions about the horizon line. You want to put some smoke just to reflect that maybe his power, he brings a fog with him wherever he goes, or he travels in the fog because of some reason, then you can keep some on the floor. But as for the character design himself, I would just make it a nice, clean setup just like that for the sake of your portfolio. When you choose this, when you have a fog like this, you're confusing the light environment. Is it a foggy day? What's happening? Are we going to be able to use cast shadows? But when you have a nice clean background value like that, you can focus on some of the bigger mistakes you have. You have an anatomy mistake here with the perspective. The head and the shoulders look like they're on the same distance level, but the leg is all the way in the back. If this was foreshortening, the head would be much bigger, and we'd see more of the upper portions of the shoulder. This is a different perspective than this. You've got two perspectives happening for two parts of the body. So those are just some suggestions I have, especially because this is grayscale. You really don't want to make it too dirty or messy. If it was colored as well, I wouldn't even let the back, because it would be even more busy actually if we had color. That background fog would just be too confusing. So I would lengthen this leg. If you want to save the perspective just a little bit, I would lengthen that. And then tilt it back up. That's pretty much all you can do. And I think that's what you were going for, just that distant leg thing and making it gray and in the distance. I think that's what you were going for, but you kind of overdid it. Maybe use the perspective reference from two different photographs. One was in an extreme perspective and one wasn't. The shape of the foot is just a little bit off. Doesn't feel grounded. Okay. But yeah, I want to know what this character is. There's so much happening on him. That fog was not necessary. Alright, so the light environment is like this general term for a very, very messy procession of fundamentals. Okay, so now that we chose the background as being a little bit lighter, start considering some of these textures are a little bit more reflective than others. Maybe we've got more reflective little shoulder pads over here. Maybe his little piece here is metallic. Maybe his skin is metallic. If he's an android, his whole skin would be metallic. He's got hair, so clearly this is all human. Which parts are android? Which parts are like, not android, what is it called? Cyborgy. So these are the areas that you make reflective, so you have to start thinking about that. You're treating all of these pieces as skin, and they're not. Alright, and that's treating it as a form study. Pick up a good reference for some body armor, like actual metallic armor from like the medieval ages, and use them to help guide your highlight paths. These little paths can be very tricky. Secondary light source in certain areas. This is the kind of stuff you deal with you know, in a light environment that you, I mean, in a form study that you could take care of before you jump into a masterpiece like this. So this is what I mean when I say I wanted to look at these very specifically, because we can see instances where students go into masterpieces and make these mistakes ahead of time. Other example of reflective material not represented properly. If they're a fish, show me that they're a fish. Build it radially. I'm just using dodge tool to kind of guide some of this. I'm thinking about the main torso shape and then the small hills on top of that. Okay, the upward facing portions of that surface area and then the shadowed areas that look down away from the light source. So that's too dark. So the torso is one cylinder, and I'm shading it as a cylinder. It's got upward facing portions on it that are receiving some light. Just a cylinder. That's all I have in my brain right now telling me what to do with these shadows. What is better than something helping you decide on shadows? You're outlining with shadows too much. Sometimes you just have a light on the edge instead of a shadow. Here you would have a shadow because it's looking away from the light source. But this whole arm, another cylinder. Oh, good. So those form cylinders, so those 50 form cylinder studies, the cylinder studies I did in a form environment, oh, those were very, very useful. Time well spent. It's slowly reaching a shadow in between. It's just the shoulder is a high point, and then we go straight back into the cylinder towards the forearm. Another instance where we've used too much shadow on the edge. So I'm just going to zoom in just a little bit. I think I've earned it. And this whole area gets shadow. This area looks up at the light source, so a cube. Cube prepared me for this. And then the cylinder is what's guiding me along the shape, and the cube told me that this part of the upper arm stops at the, because that z-axis points forward. You've got areas that are like fin-like, so clearly that they have to be thinner. They have to have some kind of subsurface scattering on them. They're translucent. The light is traveling through them. Represent them as translucent. They have a lighter value. Maybe bring in another skin tone, like another tone of so if it's green, then this color should be okay, I guess. So if you're using like such a yellow green, it's hard to tell whether or not I can bring in blush in a cool value or a warm value, but there's that subsurface scattering on that fin area. I would use it out here as well. You've used the same color too many times. That's really bad for designing creatures. Really bad. Over here, this all looks like really, really like reefy. It's not even a word. Values. I mean texture. So I would just lighten all of this up. The light is traveling right through this object. Unless it's supposed to be like pitch black, then it would explain why it's so dark. Unless the value of it is pitch black. I'm just going to change its color at least. It's a little bit too plain. And raise its value. So what are we doing? We're bringing it to life. That's the beauty of form studies. It allows us to bring something outside to pop right out of the canvas. So this whole section looks this way. All of these vectors point to this section here. We're looking away from the light source. They all have the same value. But this, it's a shadow area, yeah, but it's not looking in this direction, which is it's not as displaced as the rest, so it gets to be just a little bit lighter. It gets to have some more cylindrical values, and we only have a little bump for the knees. Maybe a double bump for the knees. Just a little butt. Okay, so I'm taking questions now. If you have any questions, ask away. And right here is where we would use a textured brush to represent the scales. I'm just going to use like this really quick scale brush I have. And that's how we would bring in the secondary texture. I made my glasses, I took them off. The breasts as well need some values. And their shadows can be just a little bit lighter. They don't have to cast such massive shadows, but they need to cast shadows though still. So they need to have a little bit of a stronger shadow moving off. Did I forget anything, Izam? Ask me a question format as a way to remind me. Izam is so sweet. They just remind me of shit that I forget. They know all these rules. They know what they're doing. Istebrak, how do you do the sharp edges? Benefit of a form study. Oh, these are old. Use at Istebrak to ask your questions. Yes, please. How would you make the scales look iridescent? Layering them, working in layers. Try to bring in different colors. Remember, they're translucent, so you can't go dark. You can't do the texture using darks. It's either midtones or highlights. Did you ever hit up that guy that sent you his phone number? Of course not. I'm not going to give random guys who give me their phone numbers on stream. I'm not going to call them. Why would fish need breasts? They're not mammals. Maybe they're mammals. Maybe they give birth and feed. Is that figure underwater? It is. It is underwater. So that's why we needed that more atmosphere, more reflectivity. The fins here. Lots and lots of space for subsurface scattering. Just some yummy, yummy subsurface scattering. Look at that. Highlight and saturate. So, saturate. And then cast the shadow back down. Wasn't that yummy? Imagine doing that everywhere. So right here, just along, well, that won't work. Just along there. That won't work either. I guess that's the only chance you get it. You can have more colors. And this is reflective, so some secondary light source. Definitely the scales are very reflective. You can make this baby pop out. Look at that. Delicious. Am I making you cringe yet? Oh, mama. Look at that. Form is a beautiful thing. Okay. I hate zooming in. I've really started to hate it, and it's starting to affect the way I draw, but I hate zooming in. It's not a bias, it's just a healthy habit that I've built off the fundamentals, but I think I've overdid it. All right. You're making me hungry. How do you avoid being monochromatic while painting? Well, you gotta do a little bit of research. Just take a look at animals. Animals, it's like section by section. If the skin is, the skin can have one value, all right? Let's say that the turtle's shell can have a color, and the turtle's skin, like the actual pokey part, I don't know what to call it, can be a little more green and brown. The eyes, a different component of the anatomy, can have a fleshier color, a whiter color. The tongue, another component of the anatomy. The only reason why they would all have the same color is if they were the same texture or the same substance or the same component. We separate, use color to represent different areas. That's a good place to start, Angel. Angel Rodriguez. Any more questions? How do you depict different textures? You have to study the form studies. You have to do those. You can't skip that stuff. Form studies are really good for, like, of textures, Really good for training your hand the dance of the texture. Every texture has a dance with it. And your paint, your brush, your hand has to do specific, you know, motions to pull off the feeling of a tree or a branch or something like that. So just a shadow down here for the belly, just to show that it's a belly and it's got a button. And there's a shadow right before it becomes that. And this rib area is doesn't jut out as far as the side. The oblique ribs just sticks out slightly. The side shadows of the breasts are not actually that dark as the lower pieces that actually look away from the light source. Oops, lighten. Okay, so we should do this more often. We should do form studies and then the actual critique hour, because it really prepares our mind to think in shapes. And it kind of helps you guys understand why I'm making certain choices with the critique. So this armpit highlight, right? It can't be as bright as this area because it doesn't face as forward as it. It looks weird, looks off. But it is lighter than the pit of the away looking, the displaced part of the armpit. There's a part that looks forward that has a little bit of light relief. Okay, so the lightest of this is actually the darkest of the forward facing pieces. If you are going to give her gills or these weird little side pieces, you got to show us on the in the silhouette. If you're going to give her those little ridges or those little like thingies to help her breathe, gills, right? So if you're doing form studies, you're benefiting from all of this. You don't have anything to worry about. If you're not doing form studies, then I'm just going to leave the gills alone because they're more like ribs than gills at the end of the day. The face, it's just a little bit off. Something off about it. The excess size of the forehead. If it's supposed to scare you, it can still be beautiful. But if you want it to stay like this, then keep it like that. I would just suggest doing the same thing, going back to your sphere. Reflective surface. Cast shadows, and of course, making sure that everything is, you have that beard shadow in place. So all of you are in the tight, safe little world of portraits, and none of you have attempted these kinds of pieces because you're avoiding masterpieces. But I'm telling you, if you try to move into the masterpiece realm without some figure studies, some kind of study to prepare you for an arm or a gesture or a foot, and what it means to render that, you're gonna have a hard time. You're gonna have a bad time. Right, so all these things that I'm putting here are just following the core values of the surrounding surface. I'm not introducing any new values outside of the core geometry. I'm going back to the basic geometry. And I'm shading the head. I'm forgetting about the face. Fuck the face. Who cares about the face if the core values, if the shadows, if all the important stuff isn't in place? Who cares about the face if the geometries aren't in place? Right? It's poetry. I'm a poet. I'm a genius. I'm a poet. I'm Shakespeare. Fucking Kanye West. Suck my dick. Whoops. I have the thing in the wrong screen. My bad. Okay, so before, after, more three-dimensional. Okay. And just fixing these edges because I was painting a different layer. And the ears, another chance for subsurface scattering. Yay! More fun. Grabbing that. So yeah, textures are very tricky. They need a little bit of, like, you know, special brain power dedication, some special RAM. All you gotta do is just get a good old rock study reference and take a look at it and see how you can break it down. into its most basic parts. Start off with the geometry, then the smaller rocks, and then the even smaller surface rocks, until you've made a pretty good reflection of the behavior of the texture. Your hand will permanently memorize that texture. Next time you need to paint a rock out of your visual library, you'll know what to do. Okay, so let's take a look at this. First, before anything, let me just fix this coarse shadow. There's a cast shadow here I forgot about. Just off the top. The arm is kind of in the way before this juts out and catches some subsurface scattering. Okay, if your character designs look like this, dude, you're gonna get hired. You're not gonna stay single very long. If your form studies start making your paintings look like this, I mean, right, you don't stay single very long if you're good at form. So if you want to get hitched, do some form studies. I speak from experience. I'm joking. Alright, so let's take a look at the before and after. There's a reason why I'm just sitting here painting away and babbling my dumb jokes, and I can still paint while I'm babbling, because my brain has a backdrop of form studies that I did when I was too uninspired to draw anything else. And I just went and did this instead. This is why this has turned into this. While we have volume, while we have form, while we've transformed two-dimensional into three-dimensional. Because we're thinking about texture, so I'm aware of the texture more. It was scaly, so I allowed myself to reach a high specularity. Usually skin doesn't get this bright unless it's wet. But the texture is scaly, so that kind of gave me a saving grace. But alright. See, the shape of the head had shadows that were very symbolic. You weren't actually thinking like it was a dome, a sphere. The top here, the light is coming from the top, right at the top, and it leads into this little ponytail. And this little piece here could use some subsurface scattering, but I can't have too much fun. Can I? Can I get away with that? The top piece over here would actually get a little bit more light. Jeremy. The water drops. Oh god. I'm just gonna zoom in. Fucking zooming in. Alright. So look at your questions, any comments, I'll just scroll up in a second. But that's it for today. I can't look at everybody's work. I'll try to look really quickly, really, like, not thorough paint over like this, but really quickly at the rest of the pieces, if I can. My voice hurts. Okay. We've got a little shadow right there. Okay. Before, after. So start doing your form studies, boys and girls. That's the real mileage. And I want to just give a little moment to talk about why we're so in need of these form studies, why we have to train for the Olympics, why as a human species we have to keep climbing to achieve anything great. It's because we're mortals. It's because we're not gods of Olympus. We're not born with this built in. We're not programmed with this versatility that is only gained when we through constant experience, this like incubation period of an upward steep climb. When we want to lose weight, when we want to get strong, we want to build muscle, when we want to build a rocket ship, there's this downtime of repetitive action. There's something that we have to repeat many times, and that thing has to be repeated many times in order for us to achieve anything. If you want to carve away at something, it's brick by brick. You don't just get to chunk away a big piece. And that's what technological advancement led to. You know, we started completing tasks in a much faster way, and I guess you can say that. But as a single, just with us, we don't have a technology that'll get you to improve faster. We don't have that, unfortunately. We don't have any way to build in or download art. Like in the Matrix, we can't download the skill. We have to actually develop it. That's the downtime. That's the day by day by day by year forward carving motion, and it hurts and it sucks and it's a piece of shit, but it's worth it because you improve exponentially. You go forward, you don't go backward. You go backward only if you don't really go back. There's no backward motion. There's just, you can stay still or you can move forward. Backward, I don't know what's backward in art. I guess just stopping it and going to do math. I don't know what the equivalent of that is in my current metaphor. But I just don't want to sound long-winded or anything like that. But I promise you, it means something. It's why we are mortal. If there was some immortal that came down to the earth and downloaded their art, we would still be stronger. Because there is a versatility and a patience and other skill sets that also develop in this forward carving motion that is art and that is studying, that is form studies. And not everything is glory. There is a lot of glory in a masterpiece. Lots of glory you can get. But it's not, if you want the greatest stage for your glory, if you want that day where you do, okay, you know what, I've deserved this chance to represent my skill level. And I've earned this glory. Let me just try at it. Let me try to climb this mountain. Let me just try to jump up there and represent myself and carry my flag and show the world my portfolio. I promise you, there will be a day when you can. Just from here and that point in the future, you got to start carving at this, and you got to start going forward. All right. However, it doesn't mean that it's just a stagnation. Just show up to your canvas and draw anything. I am giving you the technology. Form studies are the technology to get you to improve. So I have actually shown you a technology that can work for your benefit, that can work like the way a diggy machine can dig a big hole instead of having 50 people try to dig it. We get a diggy machine. What's it called? Those fucking things. We get cranes to carry heavy things instead of having to use and make ladders and make slides and slide it up using a bunch of slaves. And you know, we don't have to go in that direction. In this. We don't have to do we don't have to be archaic. We don't have to go forward so slowly. A form study will improve your work exponentially. It can feel like slave work. It can feel like slavery, just sitting there and toiling away at a form study. But I promise you, it's exponential. Each person is different, but for me, I improved pretty fast. With form studies. I just clicked. It was something that was missing in my brain. Everything else was improved, but I was being held down like another metaphor. I'm so sorry. Like imagine like okay, never mind. Fuck it. But yeah, I promise you it'll work. My heart to yours. I know it sucks, but please start your fucking form studies. Exactly, Jeremy. The glory is the blood, sweat, and tears that you put in. No, I'm not gonna plug it. Alright. Istebrak is our technology. Oh, thank you, Adam. Yeah, I'll give my voice a rest. Don't worry. When are we gonna do the next theme? The next theme is gonna show up soon. I've been a little bit busy. I've been a little bit injured, and I've been trying to heal. Sitting is really, really bad on a disc, so is sleeping, so is doing anything else, but sitting and sleeping especially, so I've had zero rest, and I've been trying to decrease the amount of time I spend on the computer. I've been trying to draw. I got out the Cintiq so I can have a little bit more of a comfortable ergonomic experience drawing. Ergonomic? I don't know what the word is, but it hasn't helped very much. So I'm very sorry for delaying the themes. I'm trying to keep my head around just my job and the public sessions, and that's it for now. But I promise you they'll be up very, very soon. Hopefully by the end of the month, I'll get that poll around. Istebrak, off-topic question. Can I buy your books anywhere? They disappeared from your store. I did take them down. I wanted to revise them and upload a new book and publish a new book for you guys that has a lot of what I've currently learned and what I'm currently learning and what I've learned in the last 2 years of private practice. So I don't feel like they represent my current skill set as a teacher, as an artist. I feel like that I could do better. So those who have a copy of my books, please keep them to yourself. Don't share them, please. I promise I'll release them again very, very soon. Tupac isn't dead. He's Istebrak. Oh my god. Alright. Back. Is it okay if I eat in class? Yes, Carlos. By all means. Form studies, do I imagine? What do I do? For forms, for the cubes, imagine that. Imagine this stuff. Try to force your brain to imagine this. Wait, one second. What the hell? Try to force your brain to imagine this stuff. Again, Porches Studio has these units, and very, very soon we're uploading a room where you can get your shapes, set them up, and you can have them for you. But again, that's referencing, so that's still referencing even if you get it off Portrait Studio. What I want you guys to try to do is just imagine the cubes, imagine the shapes before anything. As for arms and feet and learning to draw hands better and a face, use some referencing for now in your study environment. A study is still a study if it uses a reference. Istebrak, how do you know if the piece is portfolio ready? I suck at criticizing my work. A portfolio is meant to get you hired. So if the portfolio has all the units that this audience requires of you, if it's an employment audience, if it's like an official studio employment, if it's freelancing, the portfolio is ready when it has all the components that the employer is looking for, from sketches to silhouettes to turnarounds to models and whatever you need. You have to have a certain degree of skill though, so you have to be like intermediate to advanced. I know that sucks, me saying that and giving you a specific term. Some people have been hired without graduating into the advanced section of art. But I would say working on a portfolio, you're representing yourself, and if you're comfortable with representing your current skill issue, representing yourself with your current skill issues, then go for it. If you feel like you know where your issues are, but for some reason you haven't started studying them or trying to improve them, or if you haven't been doing enough studies, then I don't know what to tell you. You got to start doing some studies and forget about your portfolio for a little while. It's okay to forget about a portfolio. It's okay to allow a portfolio to not exist in your reality for the time being. It's okay. Portfolio pieces, once you have a good hold over your workflow, can just, just making them 1 week by the next. You don't have to start working on your portfolio pieces now so you can populate it. You're just going to populate it with, I'm sorry for this term, crappy work. You have to get those mistakes out of the way. You have to get rid of all those fundamental problems. You got to learn how to cast a shadow. You got to learn that before you start thinking about a portfolio. But that's my idea about portfolios for now. I can't get into that too deep. This is off topic, but is the Atlas of Beauty a good place to go for studying faces? I've never heard of the Atlas of Beauty. I'm so sorry. Istebrak, what's the meaning of Istebrak? That's off topic. Thank you, Izam, for your reminders. Did you ever hit up that? Oh, no. I guess that's all the questions for now. Looks like I was asleep. I have to go early. Goodbye. Goodbye, Izam. Thank you. Istebrak, have you ever used Blender? No, but I've used ZBrush, as you can see. Sorry if this is too prying, but what is it that you injured? A back. I slipped a disc in my back in the thoracic region. I have a disc. So it sucks so badly. Get better soon, and thank you for the class. Thank you, Fanny. Alright, I'm not done yet. I'm just going to do a quick little correction for these. This bone structure is masculine. It's boy, and that's it. It's a boy. And what we gotta do is get rid of this. If you wanted it to be a boy, it's not really working, because what I see are breasts. And I see a very, very thin neck and a very feminine shoulder line. You want it to read as a female, you gotta start getting rid of these areas. Even the bone structure of the eyebrows are just a little bit too boyish. So we're relieving this brow structure because I don't want it to read as a Neanderthal brow. This cheek here, this indentation of a cheek, very, very boy. Maybe you were doing a boy study for a while. You were studying boy faces. And that's why it kind of led to this. But if you're going for that androgynous thing, you haven't really done androgynous. You've basically given me a fully testosterone male. You give me a full male. You haven't given me androgynous. You've given me a male with makeup on a female body. That's not androgynous. Androgynous is, I can't tell, does it have boobs? It doesn't even need boobs. The face is so, the silhouette is masculine because the upper body is larger than the lower body, but there's breasts there, definitely, and the shoulder line is very effeminate, even though the upper body is larger than the lower body. The nose is very, very small, but the brows are just a little bit, you know, not as arched as a woman's would be. The lips are wide, but they're very plump. That's androgynous. Mixing it even on like the smallest micro little choices, mixing around the values. I mean, mixing around the features. That's androgynous. Androgynous isn't putting a man's head on a woman's body. So if you were going for androgynous, you're not quite there yet. The brow structure is just still a little bit masculine, but this is all I can do right now. Actually, the chin is still very far away from the mouth. The face is just a little bit long. The nose is just a little bit wide. The eyes need to be tilted downward for a female. And they need to be just apart just a little bit more so it can read as a female. I would give the eyebrows just a little bit more of an arc to push that feminine. That's, I guess, all we can do to salvage it, the eyebrow, and then bring the lips in just a little bit closer. So you'll see in a second how masculine it looked before. Do you see that? Boy, a boy wearing makeup. Well, all you gotta do is just cut corners for females. Make everything a little bit less intense, a little bit less angular, a little bit less jagged, a little bit less sharp, and you get a female version of the same face. This is the boy twin, and this is the girl twin. All right. Does she ever praise someone's work? When I want to praise, it usually just ends up in a sentence. Yes, I'm very voiced when it comes to praising. But no, this isn't Istebrak's praise hour. It's a critique hour. So I'm going to answer with, even though I do praise, I'm going to answer with no. I'm a leader. I'm not going to sit there and compliment you day in, day out. That's not how a leader leads. I like to lead. And an efficient leader doesn't sit there telling people it's going to be okay. Everything's beautiful. Everything's perfect. The butterflies are flying. The sun is shining. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you we're going to be okay. I'm going to tell you exactly what the issue is and how we're going to fix it. Okay? I like change. I'm result driven. So if complimenting you is going to get in the way of those results, I'm not going to compliment you. Alright, so before, after, I think the length of the shoulders can be, or the head size can be just a tiny bit smaller, just generally. The neck also feels very, very masculine. But yeah. If you're new here, try to stay quiet just a little bit. If you're new, watch a couple of my videos. That's the only advice I can give to haters. I know you're not a hater, but I'm saying if you're new to my channel, give it a little bit of time. All right, you'll see that I'm not your enemy. You'll see that probably I'm the only friend you ever had in art. I know that's being cocky, but trust me, I grew up very, very alone in my art environment. And in my lack of art environment, and I would have loved to have someone just give it to me exactly as I needed it, and that sounded really wrong. But tell me exactly what was wrong with me. Look me in my cocky face and tell me, Istebrak, you suck. You don't need compliments. You want to know what you need? You need form studies. Shut the fuck up and do your form studies, Istebrak. I would have loved for someone to tell me that, because I wouldn't have wasted probably all my university years from age 19 to 23 or 24 dicking around with masterpieces. All right. This piece, this entire frontal area needs to have just a little bit more form indication. Quick this and a quick that, and that's all that would be needed. If other channels are complimenting, I'm not sure what they're achieving if these other channels out there are complimenting. Are they? Are these other critique channels? I really don't know if there are any. Like, I have no idea how many there are, who's actually critiquing people, who's giving people advice. I don't know. But if they are complimenting, send them over to my channel to learn a thing or two about how to teach people. How to teach kids, especially stubborn children. I love kids. I've always enjoyed, you know, talking to them more. I feel like they have better things to say than a lot of the adults in my life. But they're very, very stubborn, and they can be extremely hard-headed. And you gotta tell them. You gotta get them. You know, tell them exactly what they need to hear. If you're sitting there complimenting them all day, you're not really doing these kids a favor. It's a form of discipline. It's a guided discipline. Don't be an enabler for overconfidence. Confidence will come. Confidence comes with skill. Alright, so that's all we needed to do. Just a little bit of an indication here for the shadows. I feel like this shadow is just a little bit dark for the fabric. It's very light fabric. Okay. So that's all I would change here. It's a pretty little dress, and I think you would benefit. I mean, negative and positive space. The size of the dress is frontal regions compared to the back. It's just a little bit of an awkward shape. But with the use of some edge work and some really, really basic stuff, you can kind of make it work. If you were going for something a little bit more billowy and it had little pieces, I think you should have given it more outer volume. That way it would have represented that upper dome at the top of the dress. But it just feels like it's just two very, very deliberate folds, like the shape. It feels like the dress is doing that deliberately, these two folds. So just think about it as a symbol like that. Okay, so that's what I would change. I'll show you the before and after. A little bit too reflective for a dress. So I do this privately, and I'm not going to waste my time doing this bath and doing a bad job with the free hour that I offer these wandering souls. Okay? So another reason why I don't compliment is because I'm not here to waste my time. It's very true. I was very scared of you in the first video. You were so intimidating, but now I love what you do, and you seem like such a sweet person as well as helpful. Thank you very much. You don't have to call me sweet, but I still love your reply to me one time. Critique horror. Watch as cocky left-wing feminazi dismantles the hard work of the working class with their outdated ideologies and dangerous computer methods. Did I really write that? I remember some of it, but did I really write that? That's so funny. Yeah, I'm okay with being the bad guy. Honestly, if it means I'm the bad coach that's punching you so you can keep going forward, I'm gonna be that. I want to be that coach. I don't want to be the enabler that doesn't help you improve, that gives you compliments day in day out. As a parent, I'm not gonna compliment my child and give them trophies for every little stupid little thing they do. I'm gonna show them that there is accomplishment to be achieved from hard work, and the compliment is earned. And I compliment a lot. I mean, I compliment when it's earned. I do. When I see something, wow, amazing choice. This is so creative. Holy shit! I would have never thought of this. This is when I'm complimenting. When I'm genuinely awed, and I am. You guys always genuinely awe me. Do we re-upload a pic if it isn't chosen? No. You just keep it there. Other people will see it. If I haven't looked at it today, then I might look at it next time. It really just depends on the topic. Don't compliment us. It's not helpful at all. I like your style. Thank you, Lena. Could you shout out at me? Cause anyone calling us direct sweet, get on. You remind me a lot of one of my lectures in uni. Give some of the best critique that we need, and that really builds upon our knowledge. Yeah. You're very welcome, Catherine. That's it for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope I covered a lot. I'm trying to cover more of these days because I've been a little bit out of practice and out of the, because I don't know when I'm gonna just suddenly cancel a class because of the pain. So I want to make sure that I'm you know, extending the hours as long as possible whenever I can. Thank you everyone for joining. If you guys wanted to submit stuff for Critique Hour, just go to istebrak.com. 4 W's is not right. istebrak.com, click on the Google Plus icon, join, read the rules. If you posted something and it's not on the wall, it's because it's being filtered. You just got to give me a second to moderate it and approve of it, and don't upload a second one. It's not a glitch. It's just the community. It's got almost 5,000 members. It's the only way we can keep it controlled. If you have 14-day challenges or miscellaneous work, please make sure you're posting to the right category. But that's it for today. Facebook, if you want your paint over sent back to you. YouTube, just subscribe and like and all that business. I'm supposed to tell you guys to subscribe and like. Twitter for announcements or class cancellations, and that's about it. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.